woman who finally stopped checking his name for 3 years. Every morning, Lena checked one name before she checked the time. Daniel. She never called him. She never sent a message. She simply opened her phone, searched his name, and looked at the last seen status beneath it. Sometimes it said nothing. Sometimes it showed that he had been online 6 minutes ago. And on the rare mornings when the little green dot appeared beside his name, Lena's heart still made the same mistake. It believed something was about to happen. Then, one Tuesday morning, she searched for Daniel, and his name was gone. Not blocked, not deleted, gone. Lena stared at the empty screen. She searched again. Then a third time. Nothing for the first time in 3 years. Lena couldn't check whether Daniel had been online, and what frightened her most wasn't that she had lost access to him. It was the sudden realization that she didn't know what she was supposed to do with herself now, because she had spent 3 years waiting for a man who wasn't coming back. And she hadn't realized that checking his name had become the closest thing she had to a relationship with him. But Daniel's name disappearing from her phone wasn't the end of the story. It was the first time Lena would finally have to ask herself a question she had avoided for 3 years. What exactly had she been hoping to find? The relationship had ended on a rainy evening in March. There had been no dramatic betrayal, no other woman, no slammed door, no final argument that neighbors could hear through the walls. Daniel had simply said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." Lena had been sitting on the edge of the sofa. She remembered looking at him and thinking that he sounded tired, not angry, not cruel, just tired. "Do what?" she asked. Daniel looked toward the window. This one word. It was the kind of word that seems clear when someone says it and becomes meaningless the moment they leave. Lena had asked him to explain. He hadn't. She asked if there was someone else. "No. Do you still love me?" Daniel had paused. That pause became the answer she remembered. "I don't know." 3 years later, Lena still remembered the silence more clearly than the words. Daniel left that night. The next morning, he sent one message, "I'm sorry." Lena stared at it for almost an hour. She typed, "For what?" then deleted it. She typed, "Please come back," deleted. Finally, she sent, "I understand." She didn't, not then. But sometimes we say the thing that makes us look strongest because we don't know how to admit we are terrified. Daniel replied with a heart. That was the last message they ever exchanged. And yet, in a strange way, it wasn't the last time they spoke, because every morning after that, Lena checked his name, and every morning she told herself the same thing, just checking, nothing more. But that wasn't true. She wasn't checking his name. She was checking whether she still mattered. At first, the checking had a purpose. She wanted to know if he had changed his photograph, if he had deleted their pictures, if he was online late at night, if his status changed, if there was evidence of another life, something, anything. The first week, she checked 20 times a day. By the second month, it was 10. By the end of the year, she had become more disciplined, 3 times, morning, lunch, before bed. She told herself this was progress. It wasn't. The checking had simply become quieter, more organized, less visible. Lena began to build her life around the possibility of information. If Daniel was online at 11:43 p.m., she wondered who he was talking to. If he disappeared for 2 days, she imagined he was traveling. If his profile picture changed, she studied the background once. She saw the corner of a woman's coat, a red sleeve, nothing else. Lena stared at that photograph for 20 minutes. She zoomed in, then again. She never discovered who the woman was. But that night, she cried in the bathroom with the tap running, and the next morning, she checked Daniel's name at 6:12. The first thing she did after waking, the last thing she did before sleeping. The name had become a door. She never opened it. She simply needed to know it was still there. But one morning, Lena discovered something that made her question whether Daniel had ever been the person she thought he was. It happened when her sister, Emma, visited. Emma had always disliked the way Lena spoke about Daniel, not because she hated him, because she could see what Lena couldn't. They were sitting at the kitchen table when Emma noticed Lena looking at her phone. "You checked again." Lena turned the screen over. "No." Emma smiled sadly. "You don't have to hide it from me. I'm not hiding anything. You've checked his name 4 times since I arrived." Lena's face tightened. Why are you keeping count? Because you aren't. That hurt. Lena stood up. She began washing a cup that was already clean. Emma watched her, then she said, "You know what I think? I'd rather not. I think you're not waiting for Daniel anymore." Lena stopped. "Then what am I doing?" Emma's answer was quiet. "You're waiting for the version of yourself that existed when he loved you." Lena looked at her. Emma continued, "You're checking his name because if he's still there, then maybe that woman you were hasn't disappeared completely." The cup slipped slightly in Lena's hand. Water ran over her fingers. For the first time, Lena understood something about herself. She wasn't checking Daniel's name because she expected him to come back. She was checking it because she was afraid that if she stopped, she would have to admit that the woman who had loved him had already become someone else, someone older, someone wiser, someone who had survived, and perhaps that was the real reason letting go felt like betrayal. Not betrayal of Daniel, betrayal of the woman who had once believed he was forever. But Emma wasn't finished. She reached into her handbag and placed something on the table, a photograph, Lena's photograph, taken 8 years earlier, before Daniel, before the relationship, before the checking. Lena looked at herself in the picture. She was laughing, really laughing, her head tilted back, her hair was messy, her eyes were closed. Emma said, "Do you remember her?" Lena smiled faintly. "Of course." Emma shook her head. "No." Lena looked up. "You don't." And suddenly, the photograph meant something different. It wasn't proof of who Lena had been. It was proof that she had forgotten. But there was another reason Emma had brought it, and Lena wouldn't understand until the following week. Honolulu. Photograph stayed on Lena's kitchen table. For 7 days, she walked past it every morning. She looked at the woman in the picture, then she looked at her phone. Daniel's name, the photograph, past, present, the life she remembered, the life she couldn't stop checking. One Thursday evening, Lena finally did something unusual. She opened Daniel's profile. She stared at his name. Then she noticed something. His photograph had changed. But this time, Lena didn't zoom in. She didn't look for a woman's sleep. She didn't wonder where he was. She looked at the date. Daniel had changed his profile picture that morning. The same morning, his disappeared from her search later that day. Lena's stomach tightened. She checked again. Nothing. Then she called Emma. Something happened. What? His account. Emma went quiet. Maybe he blocked you. I know. Does it matter? Lena didn't answer because it did, or at least it had. She had spent 3 years terrified of this exact moment, and now that it had arrived, something inside her felt strangely calm. Then at 11:47 that night, her phone rang. Unknown number. Lena stared at it. Her heart began beating faster. She knew before answering. Some part of her had been waiting for this call for 3 years. She picked up. "Hello." Silence, then a man's voice. "Lena." She couldn't breathe. Daniel, after 3 years, he had called, but the first thing he said wasn't, "I miss you." It wasn't, "I'm sorry." It wasn't, "Can we talk?" He said, "I think you need to know why I disappeared." Lena closed her eyes. She had spent years believing she wanted Daniel back, but suddenly she wasn't sure, because sometimes the answer you've been waiting for becomes frightening the moment it finally arrives. Hall Embrum. Daniel told her that he had been seeing a therapist. He said the relationship had changed him, not in the way Lena expected. "I loved you," he said. Lena's throat tightened. "Then why did you leave?" A long silence. "Because I didn't know how to be with someone who loved me that much." Lena almost laughed. "That's not an answer." "It is no." She stood by the window. "That's a sentence people use when they don't want to tell the truth." Daniel breathed out. "You're right." And then he told her the truth wasn't that he had stopped loving her. The truth was worse. He had spent years feeling like he was disappointing her every time Lena asked him where they were going. Every time she wanted reassurance. Every time she said she was afraid of losing him. Daniel heard something different. He heard, "You're not enough," so he began pulling away, not because Lena had done something wrong, because Daniel had built an entire identity around being the person who eventually disappointed everyone. "I thought if I left first," he said, "I couldn't fail you." Lena sat down. For 3 years, she had imagined 100 reasons for his leaving. Another woman, boredom, Cordice, a lack of love. She had never imagined this. Daniel hadn't left because Lena wasn't enough. He had left because he had never believed he could be enough. And suddenly, the final months of their relationship changed meaning. The arguments, the silence, his distance, the way he stopped looking at her. They hadn't been evidence of indifference. They had been evidence of fear. But Lena had one question left. Why didn't you come back? Daniel didn't answer immediately, and Lena knew there was something else, something bigger. Because you never called me either, Daniel said. Lena froze. What? You said you understood. I was angry, I know. You left, I know. You didn't come back. I was waiting. Lena stood. You were waiting, yes. For what? Daniel's voice became very quiet. For you to tell me I was wrong. Lena stared at the wall. 3 years. 3 years of checking his name. 3 years of wondering why he had never returned. And he had been waiting too. But then she understood something. They had both been waiting. Not for love. Not even for each other. They had been waiting for the other person to admit they were the one who had lost. Lena sat down again. And suddenly the relationship looked different. Daniel had been afraid of failing her. Lena had been afraid of being abandoned. He withdrew, she pursued. He felt trapped, she felt rejected. He left, she stopped calling. And then they both called the silence, proof that the other person didn't care. The phone had never been the problem. The silence was. But Daniel still had one thing left to tell her. And this time, Lena wasn't sure she wanted to hear it. All under a begunskere. I met someone, Daniel said. Lena closed her eyes. There it was, the ending she had feared. For 3 years she had imagined this moment. She had imagined another woman, a happy photograph, a new life. She waited. She's not my girlfriend. Lena opened her eyes. Then who is she? My sister. Lena stared. Daniel laughed quietly. I know. For the first time in 3 years, Lena laughed too. But then Daniel became serious. She has cancer. The room changed. Daniel, I've been helping her. Lena understood. The photograph, the red sleeve, the woman she had imagined. It had never been another woman. It had been his sister. The tiny detail that had tortured Lena for years had been meaningless. But the emotional echo was bigger than that. The photograph she had once interpreted as evidence that Daniel had replaced her now became evidence of something else entirely. She had spent years building a story from a single red sleeve, because when we are afraid of being forgotten, we become very good at turning uncertainty into evidence. Daniel was silent, then he said, I didn't call you because I didn't want to reopen your life. Lena whispered, you already did. I know. No. She looked at the photograph on the table. You reopened it 3 years ago. Daniel didn't answer, and Lena realized something. She had spent 3 years waiting for Daniel to explain his disappearance, but perhaps what she really needed was to explain her own. She had disappeared too, not from Daniel's life, from her own. On Langrer. The next morning, Lena woke up at 6:12. Her hand moved toward her phone. She stopped. Daniel's name. She could search it. She could see if he was online. She could check whether he had changed his picture. She could find out if he had spoken to someone. Anything for 3 years. Her fingers had known what to do before her mind was awake. But this time she didn't open the phone. She looked at the photograph instead. The woman laughing. The woman before Daniel. The woman who didn't know that one day she would spend 3 years searching for a name. Lena picked up the photograph. She turned it over. On the back, Emma had written something years ago. A date and 4 words. We're happy here. Lena smiled. No, she wasn't happy because Daniel wasn't there. She had been happy because she was there. That was the difference. And perhaps that was what she had forgotten. The name in her phone had become a measure of whether she was loved. But love had never been meant to be measured by a green dot, or a last seen time, or whether someone appeared online, or whether someone chose to return. Sometimes the most painful part of letting go isn't losing the person, it's losing the habit of looking for them. Pull. For the next month, Lena stopped checking. Not perfectly once. She opened the search bar. She typed D, then stopped. Another day. She saw a photograph that reminded her of Daniel. Her hand moved toward her phone. She stopped again. Healing, she discovered, wasn't a door you walked through once. It was a series of tiny decisions nobody else noticed. Don't check, don't reread, don't search, don't invent a story, don't turn silence into evidence. Then one Saturday afternoon, Emma called, How are you? Lena looked at the photograph. I'm okay, really. Lena smiled. Really? Did you ever check his name again? Lena thought about it. Yes. Emma waited. When? Yesterday. Emma was quiet. Why? Lena looked down at her phone. Because I wanted to know if I still wanted to. And Lena smiled. I didn't. That was the moment she understood. She hadn't stopped checking because Daniel had disappeared. She had stopped checking because she had finally returned. Returned to herself. Months later, Lena moved the photograph from the kitchen table. She placed it beside her bed. The phone stayed there too, but it had changed, not physically, emotionally. At the beginning of the story, Daniel's name had been a door. Then it became a wound, then a habit, then evidence, then a question. And finally, it became nothing she needed to check. One evening, Lena opened her phone. She searched Daniel's name. His profile appeared. He was online. For a moment, she stared at the green dot. 3 years ago, it would have meant everything. Now it meant nothing. She closed the phone. And that was when she realized she had finally stopped checking his name. Not because she hated him, not because she had forgotten him, not because she had found someone else, but because she no longer needed to know where he was, to know where she stood. She turned off the light. The photograph beside her bed caught a little moonlight. The woman in it was still laughing, still young, still unaware of everything that was coming. Lena smiled at her. I remember you now. And perhaps that is what healing sometimes looks like. Not deleting someone's name, not pretending you never loved them, not waking up one morning and feeling nothing. Sometimes healing is much quieter. It is the moment you stop checking that someone else has moved on, and finally notice that you have been moving forward. Because there are people years watching from a distance, waiting for their name to appear, waiting for their message, waiting for proof. Until one day we realized the person we were really waiting to find was ourselves. Lena's phone remained silent. She didn't turn it over. She didn't check. She simply closed her eyes. And for the first time in 3 years, tomorrow didn't depend on who was online. It belonged to her. And somewhere, in the quiet space between one life and the next, a woman who had spent years checking a name finally understood something simple. You don't have to stop loving someone to stop waiting for them. Sometimes you just have to love yourself enough to stop looking at the door and walk away from it. Not angry, not bitter, just free.